Hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from Sales Pop, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM. Joining you as usual. I was going to say as usual from a sunny San Diego, but actually it's a rainy San Diego for a change. And today I'm delighted to be joined just up a little bit across in Portland, Oregon from Kash Rocheleau. How are you doing, Kash?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and Kash is the CEO of Icon Foods and serves as the chief financial officer for three additional companies: Icon Foods, Guy Gone Keto, and King Capital Investments. Also, the co-owner of the Reset Button, a one-stop shop for ADAS calibration services, where she manages financial aspects of business such as budgeting, cash flow, investments, tax planning. And you're passionate about helping businesses achieve their goals and solve their challenges using your finance expertise and your entrepreneurial mindset. So, what I wanted to start talking about, Kash, is that I think there's oftentimes like entrepreneurs, or when they start businesses, like they're very passionate about their idea, right? And
Mhm.
they want to do, and they want to go out and they want to announce it to the world, and they want to do all of that. Um, and sometimes the financial side is it's a little bit murky to them, or maybe it's not where
Mhm.
their expertise lies. And I feel sometimes that undoes a lot of people because they kind of shy away from it and think, well, if I just focus on the in being enthusiastic and pushing my product or service, that the money will come in, and then the financial stuff it'll kind of take care of itself.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that for me, coming from a finance background, moving into more of the entrepreneurial side on the latter side of my
Mhm.
career has significantly helped with that, because you see this all the time,
Mhm.
specifically with entrepreneurs. They want all the revenue. They want all the revenue. They want to live this high life. They want to go to all these trade shows. They want to do all these things, but those come at an expense. And so while the revenue is there, are you actually profitable?
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, I would say, like, startups specifically fail due to those reasons, that while the revenue is there, the profitability is not, because the mindset I hear so often is, I'm just going to bring in the customers, I'm going to bring in the revenue, and then I'm going to fix the expenses, or I'm going to tighten up the expenses. And it never works that way. The best analogy I have for that is, you have an entrepreneur flying in first class, and once they've made it, they're going to go back to economy. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I feel like, and even experiences in the past I've had, looking back, and you go, yes, if you were so much tighter at the beginning, it
Mhm.
will be so much better later on. But I think sometimes, like as you said, people get carried away on the enthusiasm, and then you say, even if the revenue is coming in, let's face it, Cash, revenue is one thing, but actually getting paid for everything and having capital and cash flow and liquidity in your business,
Yeah.
because sometimes you can say, oh look, I've sold all these deals, and
Yeah.
then you realize, yeah, maybe you've sold it to a big company and you can say net 30, net 15 if you want, and the big company goes, yeah, I'll give it to you when I feel like it, because you ain't going to be able to do anything about that.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. One thing that I constantly talk to other leaders in the industry about is, would you look, if you're coming from an acquisition side, I'm ready to acquire something, or grow inorganically, would you look at a business that's doing $1 million in revenue, that has $500,000 of EBITDA?
Hmm.
Or are you going to look at a company that's doing $20 million in revenue, that's got a negative EBITDA?
Exactly.
So, to your point, revenue is really inconsequential to me.
Hmm.
I'm really looking at the EBITDA and the net profit line. Like, what are you doing with the revenue that's coming in? Because those are two different companies and two different leagues,
Hmm.
but the profitability matters.
Yeah, and the thing is that, as I said, sometimes, especially if you come from the entrepreneur kind of comes from a more selling side or has an idea or wants to be involved on the sales side. Traditionally, those kind of people tend to ignore the everything, the expense side of the equation and the bottom line side of the equation, because everything is focused on growth and fast growth. And taking a time out at the beginning to understand the expense side. I'm sure you spend a lot of time when you're advising businesses on just really getting down into the detail of the expense side and saying how important you have to learn that side at the outset.
I think budgeting is pivotal, and it's something that I'm harping on my employees on constantly. We make a budget for a reason, and if we're going to go outside of that budget, you've got to have a business case for it, and there's got to be an ROI on the other side. We can't just spend frivolously because it's the cool thing to do. So I'm always digging into to expenses. I also think that on the flip side of that, there's a lot of financial leaders that are penny pinchers, and there's times where they think that saving is the right move to do when ultimately you're consuming resources like time, and resources that you really don't need to waste versus just buying the new printer.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good point that you make, because a number of years back, we did this. Another company I was running, we did this white paper on what we call the silent killers of a business. And one of the things was one of the questions we would ask is, we're doing a presentation audience, like what destroys the most homes in America every year. People would say fire. Unfortunately, we had the fires recently, so fire or flood or hurricanes, and we go, no, termites. Termites are the biggest and the biggest destroyers of homes. And what happens with termites is you don't notice them because they're eating away little by little, and over many years, and then suddenly the house falls down. There's a lot of hidden costs in your business that you just referred to there, using resources without allocating them, right? I mean, and you go, well, I'll just get cash to do this stuff, and I'm not accounting for the fact that I'm taking you away from doing something else, or I'm using your valuable time on something, but I'm not accounting for it.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, I think it's super important. There's a lot of, specifically entrepreneurs. I mean, when you're in a larger company, you have stakeholders. So even as a CEO, you've got people that you're answering to that want answers to these questions, especially if they're not getting their returns. But in those smaller companies, you have entrepreneurs that are less in tune with the P&L or the balance sheet, and they're caught off guard at tax season. Like, what do you mean we're not profitable? Well, remember, all those dinners that you required to go to with the customers, or, all those trade shows you thought were so important. Like those were dollars that had to be spent. And so I think that it's super important that even if you don't have a finance background, that you do have the basic foundations to read P&Ls and to ask the questions, and not be scared to ask the questions on where things are going, why we're doing them, and ask for ROIs. Like, if we're going to go to this trade show, what am I going to get in return for this expense?
Yeah, and it's always a good. Yeah, I would agree. And it's always a good rule of thumb is that if you can't come up with a good ROI model for whatever you're doing, it's simple. It's a trade show. If you can't come up with a good ROI model that you're going to be able to track, and you're going to be able to come back and say, this is what this produced, then I don't think you should be going.
Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah, I think that you get into, again, specifically smaller businesses, you get into those traps of, maybe we're not profitable, or maybe we're not pulling in enough revenue as we should. And so you start just throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping the noodles are going to stick. So let me just throw 4 more trade shows on the calendar and drum up business. But are you really going into the micros of what you're getting out of the trade shows versus what you're putting into them? And it's not always the answer.
And ask yourself, like, over your whole career, of all the trade shows you've been to, how many of them have actually been been something that's been a success for you, or I guarantee you for most people, I could say myself, I'll honestly say, I would say 90% of the trade shows I ever went to were a waste of time ultimately.
That's interesting. I don't know if my number's that high. I think we're in the food industry. And
Sure. Right.
so, you're dealing with a few multi-billion-dollar companies that
Hmm.
are really running the industry. And being at those shows may be your only opportunity.
Right.
So I'd say, like, when you look at the maybe the month after ROI, it's probably pretty low. But when you look at, I would say our top 10 customers that do business with us now came from a trade show
Mhm.
that we would have never had access to these specific decision makers had we not been present there.
Yeah, but I think, no, that's a good clarification though, because I do think you're correct. I mean, if you find the right ones that you should be at,
Yeah,
then you should be there, and then you should not just be there, but you should put a lot of energy into thinking, how can I maximize this, because this is probably going to be one of my
100%.
only shots, only shots this year. So I totally agree with that, and I think that comes down to focus, doesn't it? Because I think that's
Yeah.
another thing that small businesses and startup businesses sometimes struggle with, is you start off and say, you've got to focus, this is what we're going to do, this is our kind of target customer or buyer, this is what the market we're going to go after, and we're
Mhm.
going to be very focused on it. And then you start and you go, yeah, this is, it's a little harder than I thought. And then there's this thing over here that, well, it's kind of outside of what we do, but let's go over and do that. And before you know it, you're doing more of the adjacent things, shall we say, than the focus things. And eventually that kind of, you end up in that situation where it's feast or famine, right? You're doing some work and then you have to go back and try and generate business, and then you're doing some other work, and everything turns out to be like custom or bespoke or whatever.
I think you're right on that, but I think that a lot of that comes from a lack of mission and vision.
Hmm.
And if you don't have your mission and vision, target audience clearly defined, and when I say clearly, I mean that your organization from the top down knows, then you get trapped into that. For us, we operate off of EOS. For those that don't know what that is, it's Entrepreneur Operating System. And we do quarterly meetings with the leadership team, and we really drill. 3 years ago, there was no mission, vision, or
Hmm.
core values, and over the last 3 years, we've really drilled in, identified, clarified, and communicated those from the top down. And so, 3 years ago, if we had, I mean, our mission is clean label sugar reduction.
Right.
3 years ago, if revenue's not there and we had a customer come to us saying, I'm looking for a truckload of cane sugar, we'd be like, yeah, we could do that. It's dollars on the
Yeah.
books. And now, because we have the buy-in from the top down, you've kind of got voices saying, like, that's not really in our ethos, clean label sugar reduction, but we're going to sell a truckload. And so you start to bring accountability and buy-in from the team. And you realize those little one-offs, when you can really hone in on your focus, mission, you start to put all of that outside noise to the
Mhm.
wayside. You become more profitable because
Yeah.
you're focused on the areas where you truly are an expert, instead of, again, trying to drive up revenue that's really like this
Yeah.
ambiguous number.
Yeah. So tell me, when you did that with Icon Foods, and you moved to be more focused and having your mission and vision and saying this is, what difference did it make to, say, the people who work with you? How did it change the way they approached work?
It certainly clarified things. I would say specifically for the sales department,
Mhm.
because in the food ingredient world, it's very technical. And specifically what we do, reducing or removing sugar, there's not a one-to-one replacement. It's not like I want to pull out sugar, but let me just add a cup of stevia. It doesn't work like
Mhm.
that. And so you have a lot of formulators in this industry that want to do that, aren't sure how to do it. And again, they're throwing noodles at the wall, hoping one of them are going to stick. And so when we clarified down what we do. This is what we do. Only clean label sugar reduction. We're not dealing in the sugar. It narrowed the scope for the sales team. And so instead of having 17 lanes to kind of have a fork in a road, they were able to say, this isn't in my wheelhouse. This isn't in our wheelhouse. Let me give you the resources to another company that does that. And it shifted the resources of their time onto the things that we do and things that are matter and things that are going to cultivate into true, tangible, profitable business. So I would say it created a lot of efficiencies and clarities and profitability, because now we're an expert in 5 ingredients instead of we're trying to be an expert in 250.
Yeah, no, that's a great example of how focus, which is sometimes it's scary for people, because focus means you're making a decision and you're selecting, this path to run on. It means by default you are unselecting these other paths, and sometimes people, that's scary for people because they think, oh well, what happens if this one doesn't work out for me? But the fact is, if you choose the right one, you've done your research, you know the right one you're in. It's your route to profitability as opposed to your route to just revenue generation.
Yeah, but I think you also create credibility within
Yeah.
yourself and within the company, because we can be looked at as experts in clean label sugar reduction because we don't deal with the other 17,000 ingredients that are on the market. We only deal in this specific area. So I think it brings a lot of credibility, trust, and respect to that niche area that we do work in. And you're right, it is super fearful because there's a lot of opportunity again at that revenue line if you're dealing in all of those ingredients. But you have to look at the EBITDA, you have to look at the net profit, and does it make sense?
Yeah, but like you said there, what's nice about it too is it allows your salespeople, the people who represent your company, to develop an expertise in a particular area, and then be able to be that elusive, like trusted advisor, or somebody who, potential your clients and your prospects look to you for some insight and advice, as opposed to just thinking of you as somebody trying to sell you something out of your catalog.
Yeah. Yeah.
And tell me, how has that changed in terms of like how you go to market, right? When you get that focus, when you have your mission and vision, how did that change your overall go to market, or did it?
It didn't really change much. I mean, our go to market hasn't really changed. It has definitely fine-tuned what we're willing to say yes to and what we're willing to say no to. I think that at this juncture we say no to more things than we say yes to. And so I would say that that's been the biggest change. Not really go to market. Not much has changed there.
Right. But like you said, that again, that's a really important point for people is, saying no, because saying no is hard, especially small
Very
businesses. It's very hard. But it's so critical, because if you're saying yes to everything, then you have to ask yourself, what are we actually good at? What are we best at? And if you're not actually best at anything, chances are, you're commoditized, and you could be successful, but your chance of being really successful are slim.
Exactly. Yeah, we talk to our sales team pretty often about opportunity loss, right? Like if we say yes to this, and I'm a big believer in Simon Sinek's start with the why. But if we say yes to something, what do we have to say no to? Because to your point, you cannot say yes to everything. You're gonna burn really quick. And so when you say yes to something, you have to say yes fully, but it means you have to say no to other things. And are those things that you're saying no to worth the yes here? And sometimes breaking it down for them and explaining this is why we're not going to do something, because these are the things we'd have to say no to, which create way more value for you and the organization and the customer. It changes that perspective of,
Well, no, it's such a good way of approaching it, because otherwise people are always like, well, we can say yes to this, but we can continue to do all these other things as well. You go, well, you can't actually. So you're going to have to say no. You're going to have to say no. And people, as we said earlier, people hate to say no. And so it really does force you to make educated and informed decisions, and it forces you to be selective. I also love when you run like strategy sessions, and we talk about what, and people have all these great ideas about what we're going to do this year, and I'd always go, yeah, great ideas. And I go, okay, we got all these great ideas. Okay, let's talk about what we're not going to do anymore. What are we going to stop? And suddenly there's silence in the room because nobody wants to really, because people are so reluctant to stop or let go of something, even if they don't really understand whether it brings value anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think too, when you look at some of these bigger brands that have been around for a long period of time, we don't see all of the failures and the no's that went into that. And when you look at entrepreneurs specifically, they have got 10,000 ideas. I kid you not. And that's even on the low end. And really out of those 10,000 ideas, probably 2 of them are great. And we miss that, 9,998 ideas that they had to say no to or kick to the curb, or someone else told them that they were a terrible idea to get to this great idea. And so as an entrepreneur, I think that you get so hung up on your idea that you also have to be fluid and open to the market changes, trend changes, the process changes that need to happen when you actually start to commercialize an idea. And so, yeah, you do have to say, no to things, and you have to look at things that you're willing to turn off. And I wish that we would normalize those topics in the business world, the things that you have to say no to.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's heavily rooted in human nature because we don't like to make choices. We it's like that old thing is, if you put somebody in front of 3 doors and say choose a door, they will probably choose one of the 3 doors. If you put 8 doors in front of them or 10 doors, they won't choose any because they'll be so overwhelmed with it could be this, it could be that. But so yeah. Well, listen, Kash, this has been fantastic. All of Kash's information will be below this video. But before we go, please do tell people a little bit more about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Kash. My background is finance. I went to school and got a master's in accounting and finance. I found myself in the food ingredient space, specifically in the no sugar added space, which is a very important area right now, specifically for Americans. And about a year ago, I was moved into a CEO role, and I get to serve the people here at Icon Foods in helping create better products on the market for Americans to eliminate or at least reduce sugar in their diet.
Perfect. Well, it was a great mission. So thanks again, Kash. Thank you for watching and listening. I will see you all again very soon. Thank you.